Hey, muy buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, and of course, the love you guys extend and share with me from the heart. Muchísimas gracias. Also, do please like, share, and subscribe. Well, to get into the story on him, today I'm going to touch on something that we were talking about in the last live, right? But it's been brought up a couple times. So I do want to touch a little bit more further into it. Of course, with caution, because as you guys know, I only talk about stuff I have personal knowledge of. So this ain't too old, right? Nevertheless, it's not going to jeopardize nobody. I want to make that clear, right? But it did affect someone I knew personally, like real good, right? But anyways, this happened 2019-20. Like I said, it's not too old, right? And it's gonna circle around El Viejo, or the old man from La Habra, right? Rob Aguirre. And first and foremost, I met him before I went to the feds, right up in La Bahia. But you know, he's one of them quiet, cool ones, to be sincere. But again, the problem lies that they don't really get you nowhere, right? Unfortunately, they have to align themselves to maintain, period, point blank, right? I'm gonna do something on Cuervo from OC as well, right? But just to touch a little bit into dude, right? What was just one of them dirty, scandalous vatos, right? A lot of people don't know him good. I touched on when he came up and that podcast and basically just pinpointed on what he was doing, right? Which was he felt he had the right to tell on somebody that he considers a rat, which could be, right? But what does that make him? Telling on a rat, right? But again, it's one of them things that should always be minimized, right? But anyways, you know, people recommend me to go watch it. I watched it, as you guys know, and that fool far from what he truly is, right? First and foremost, what's spoken about him in Corcoran, it's 100% facts, right? However he disguised it, whatever he paid to get out of it, who he paid, that's his business. Nevertheless, I read the paperwork, I read the excuse. Do know when he was in Sadef, running the yard with Speedy, you know, I was the person he was answering to back in PR validated, right? So again, I know a lot of things haven't came out on this individual for one, the way he is with his soldados, right? Amenazándolos, threatening families, how well, again, I will touch on this individual. So to get back to Rob from La Habra, right? I call him El Viejon, right? Again, I knew him on a personal tip. He's mellow, he's firmes, but his problem is he had to align himself with Crow, right? As others, but I think the biggest problem is Crow, right? And besides the shoe, I never walked the line with him, so I couldn't really speak out on his ways, right? So, nevertheless, again, I'll take you back to 2019. These are the actions that he took them, but I'm pretty sure he had somebody behind his ear, right? And nevertheless, I want to touch on what we speak on, which is that's my big homie, right? Because you're from the same neighborhood. But I want to talk about Big Head or Jug. For those that know him from La Habra, right? He was up in Pelican Bay way before me, and he's a good individual, real good individual. He was liked by many. I'll just say it like that, right? There, it's just, it takes a toll. What do I mean by takes a toll? For example, if you don't have direct family ties to candy and stuff like that, when you sit in the shoe for that many years, eventually you start losing power. Of course, it's not the same with a Pili, right? A Pili constantly, there's a rotation happening with camaradas, new avenues, new movement, whatever, right? a camarada just sitting back there supporting, being a secretaria, soldado, whatever you want to call it. But they start minimizing, right? Start losing it. It's just facts. I seen it many, many times with a lot of camaradas, and it wasn't because of him. It was just the surroundings, right? But nevertheless, a lot of them knew how to stay relevant, right? Holding a yard down or whatever. Anyways, getting back to Big Head, right? When I took off to the feds, you know, Big Head eventually ended up in Folsom, and of course, within time, his Billy, his señor from his neighborhood would end up there with him, right? Which is Rob. And El Viejón, at first it was all firmes, right? Big Head started doing his thing. He started supporting, right? He started doing what he's supposed to, right? Which is whatever may present itself, you gotta boogie and handle business. But homeboy, after so many years, he was getting close to go home. He wasn't an all dayer, right? So he started leaning on his homie, his Billy, trusting in him that he wanted less responsibilities, so he was able to parole, right? And support him from the street, which in reality, a smart individual, that's what he would look for, right? Instead of doing all these things and making all these excuses, and Ham and Crow, as I would touch on, getting tired of their own soldados making up these excuses to have him whack and remove. Again, I will touch on that, right? Nevertheless, Rob didn't like it. He started coming up with excuses to regulate, right? The homie, that he's been there, done that, right? And then coming up with dumb excuses. For example, homeboy was an older homie, had kids coming to visit him, right? Homeboy was short to the house. That was the whole conversation started, that he trusted on his homeboy, right? He wasn't pulling out, he was just requesting some love to make it to the streets, right? And keep pushing for that Billy in town. But I don't know what goes through Billy's head, right? My head is like, he's better off outside than inside, right? Where there's thousands of them, thousands of camaradas willing to do the things you're able to do inside. But I heard so many things, right? But again, I heard them, but it had to do with, well, things on the streets that should not matter, right? That are not important. Different cliques, set tripping. Again, it's just hearsay and I'm not gonna touch on it, right? But anyways, the reason why I came across knowing this is because I had a homeboy on the same yard, right? I'll just call him C. And he had a couple years to the pad too. And it became, again, C's wife used to go up a lot because, again, the town from Folsom is backyard, right, to Santa Rosa. So homeboy started pressing the issue, right? He was a Billy. You were going to do as he said. He wanted family members nearby to start coming in and bringing Hale. And it wasn't a request. It was a mandatory for those that come on here and say that they're not doing it. Take those blindfolds off. Again, my homeboy, we were in touch years, and again, I was still, because doing things out in Mexico, right? So he confided me and saying like, hey, since I wouldn't have, I'll just say B, right, his wife, bring in Holland. They've been putting tips on me, and the homie wants to talk to you. Is when I had got on the cuerno with Big Head, right, from La Habra, and I might have made a mistake, right? And I thought I was helping, and again, I was nobody. So I told him, hey, let me put you on the cuerno with somebody that might have that pull to give you good, better advice than myself, right? And Charles, the pile might put on the phone. He could have pulled, right? But he said just do what his brother's telling him to do, period, point blank. And then he went off and called his brother and basically snitched on the camaradas that were speaking out their neck on him. So, it became him wanting work. For example, the homie Big Head's family from La Habra to bring material up, and then my homie to have his wife and sister that were coming every week bring it in. Or threats started being given, right? People started speaking to people outside of visiting, after visiting, which is should be them grounds that not even them could should be able to tap into, right? But nevertheless, they're above the program. You know, within time they were short, so basically told them I'm gonna wash you up. You're gonna go on a mission. There was trash on the yard, and them two fools being short to the house just 'cause they said no. I'm forcing their family to bring in dope for him. 'Cause again, the new rules and regulation is you bring it in and you ain't kicking down a third. You're grabbing the whole jale as it comes in and you're giving it to him, and he's gonna kick you down whatever he feels you got coming. If he feels you got it coming. All that other stuff that once people like from my area live that was a respect thing. It's not no more. Nevertheless, again, there was a trash, and instead of doing what a camarada, let's leave out the EME stuff, camarada should do for other camaradas, which is allow lifers to go handle their business. I know with the law changes and stuff, well, look at me, right? Even if you're a lifer, you could get out of it. But remember, one time, I'm not even going to glorify how many times, but that I went and handled business that the DA picked it up because they seen the life sent that L in my jacket and they refused to pick it up. You got a better chance of beating whatever you do, right? Because you're going to get caught. 1 out of 10, maybe you're able to wiggle your way out of things and not get caught. But again, everybody's telling, right? But you see, like I told C, at that time they were fed up with the program, right? And I understood Big Head from La Habra, and he was doing that shoot thing way before me for supporting them, and he supported them all the way till they got out the shoot, period, point blank. The only mistake he made was to trust his Billy from his neighborhood, which is, whole man Rob, per se, from La Habra. But he has this staccato ways that he picked up from Crow. I'm assuming, right? Again, could have been himself, right? That was basically his way or the highway, point blank. You didn't matter. Your family didn't matter. Nada mattered but what he wanted. It's exactly what's happening now. They're abusing their power and nobody questioning it, point blank. Unless they feel like politicking against each other, then, then abusing power becomes an issue of to remove each other, right? Of course, it's when it benefits another one to take over what the other one has, right? When they're uña y mugre together, then it's all good, they'll back each other up, right? For example, tell me what old man D from Ontario gained from speaking with a camarada to call, it's just, it makes no sense, right? But nevertheless, they made the mistake, right? Because they walked away. That's why I said, hey, this ain't gonna hurt nobody. They got caught. Another one on the mission. Homeboy had one of them crimes. So he had to bounce point blank, right? And again, there's lifers on the yard, right? But again, he was upset at the camarada, so he was gonna ruin their whole life. What happened to taking care of the raza? Doing things for the raza? Especially for those that have time under their belt and support, right? They went and hit it and they were fed up. You see, there's no more shoes. You go back, you sit in the hole till you get kicked out back to the main line. So tell me, when things unfolded the way they did, right? They were getting coscorrones given to them daily almost for no reason, just because they were getting a lot of business from their family, or they requested to step back a little bit to get out after what, 20, 30 years, whatever. And that was offensive. So either you tell your family to do things or you're going to keep being my dummy, keep pulling missions and keep catching time. They lost their date. How much time they got? Double digits, I'll just say that, right? Thank you, God. They didn't get the L, right, per se, because they just did a couple little holes on the individual, right? Again, he was one of them fools that deserve whatever, not just holes, but anyways, that's just my opinion, where they made the mistakes, right? When they're in the hole about to get kicked back out, they ruined their date, but their thought was, because I spoken to him afterwards, right, was, why am I going to go back into the yard to get keep getting regulated for no reason, keep getting pressure to have my wife and family bring in their dope, or else, or have people talk to them after visiting and threatening them that they have to do what is being implemented by someone they don't even know, that they're not even a part of. So they locked it up. And again, I'm against that, right? But I'll leave it with this answer. If you were in that position, what would you do? Again, you handle business, right? You don't winnie out. But things were like this unfolding for months. To know you went in boogie, you used to go to the shoe and get kicked out to a different yard, right? Different avenue, different heads, whatever. But he was gonna get kicked out back to the same yard, go back to the same thing. So where is that? Where's that fall? That's my Pili. Or that's the Pili period. The one that's here for the raza. I'll leave it with that. What would you do? Be smart. Things ain't as a lot of people paint it, as you would hear in my next story. I had a personal thing on, well, you'll hear. Just be smart. Analyze what's really out there. It don't matter how much you're on the streets boogieing. At least for myself, right? I always held my family in dear. So think not only in the agony you're gonna put your family to do time with you, but on the spot you might be having to put them for your decision to want to earn your stripes. So be smart, stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones. Buenas noches.